Welcome to another episode of The Diplomats where we discuss the Season 5 online Nexus finals brought to you by diplomacybriefing.com. Umble's not here today, but we have, as we learned from our last podcast, not the machine, not the Terminator of Umble, but the artist of diplomacy who calls himself Audacious, who sees its beauty and potential, not its evilness, vindictiveness. And so we're here to talk about what's shaping up to be a bunch of great players, talking about the fall 1901. Hand, how are you doing today? Thanks for joining the podcast.
Very well. It's nice to be talking to you from bed and drinking a couple cups of coffee and looking at a diplomacy board.
All right, don't make it sound dirtier than it actually is.
Oh, well, should they not know that we're just lying together in bed?
Well, it's the kind of thing I don't like to publicize, given that I have a wife and family, and now that if you're saying you're my side piece on YouTube, it's going to be problematic. But I'm sure my family doesn't listen.
Oh yeah. Well, we just play diplomacy together in bed. Come on, just close friends.
All right, we'll keep it on the DL. One thing not on the DL, however, would be two things. Sign up for our sponsors, Diplomacy Briefing at diplomacybriefing.com. I'm sorry I forgot to mention that. And two, the moves, which have been publicly released for fall and winter of 1901. So here we go. And, tell me where you want to start.
Why don't we start? Let's start with Italy and then maybe kind of go clockwise or counterclockwise around the powers, perhaps.
Absolutely. All right. Let's go to Italy. The big question I have there is the hold in Trieste, was that arranged?
Right. I mean, Italy's moves are fairly enigmatic at this point. And I am absolutely sure that everything I'm saying does not even scratch the surface, right, of what's going on. But the fact that's enigmatic is a good thing, right? I mean, if we are puzzled from without, then your opponents are also puzzled.
The reason why I think is, a lot of times Trieste will go to Serbia as part of Aquila Panto.
That's right, yeah.
But on the other hand, it puts the fleets in, Albania. You lose a little tempo because Albania doesn't go to Greece because Serbia has to go to Greece. And a lot of times that move is simply bounced with Bulgaria from Turkey. So maybe they thought it's going to bounce and they wanted to get the units in position. On the other hand, he doesn't move to Vienna, so that could say, well, we don't want to upset Russia in this AIR. So, and then the third possibility is it was never arranged to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few options, right? So last episode, I did discuss how I do kind of appreciate Italy's game insofar as even while it's not by any stretch of the imagination the most efficient Kilopanto, the most efficient attack on Turkey, right? You've got the three powers going against Turkey at this point. There's not really any kind of rush to kind of eviscerate the possibility of a juggernaut. And I mentioned how Italy should have a little self-respect, a little self-love, give itself a few centers. You're the key to unlocking Turkey. They need you. Let them come to you to some extent, right? So there might be some of that going on. Maybe instead of Budapest supporting Trieste into Serbia, they just decided, okay, well, we're going to get Italy some extra fleets, and then Austria can take that back on its own time. Italy doesn't need two armies.
I think that's the key, right? We'll know with the builds what the situation is up there.
Possibly. I mean, it could be a more dynamic situation.
That's true.
It could be, I wonder. I mean, Austria could be very simple, and Austria could have very well expected Trieste to move to like Albania or back to Venice. Now, as for the possible move to Vienna, that is pretty anti-Russian. That's something I actually did in, I believe, season 4, right? Me and Austria had something worked out where I let myself get pushed out of Munich and took Vienna, and then ended up in Silesia and Galatia. But yeah, the whole, it could also just be that Italy kind of still wants to hedge its bets against Turkey and would rather stay a little closer to his lines. So if he gets pushed out of Trieste, he can retreat to Venice and still block up northern Italy. But I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, to me, it seems like an Italy that is intelligently dragging her feet a little bit, allowing her to gain steam. And once we get to the builds, we could talk about like the possibilities Italy has here, because I think people, I wouldn't necessarily assume that Italy is even going to quickly move against Turkey in the next few years. But yeah,
Okay.
it's enigmatic. It is enigmatic, and I like to see that. I appreciate not knowing what's going on. For a moment, I didn't let myself say this because it was too beautiful, but I was kind of hoping he would move that army to Albania, and then Austria would take the Ionian, and he would move into the Eastern Mediterranean, and then you get that Albanian convo line, which is always really surprising. For some reason, people seem to forget that Albania borders the Ionian. It's always a good surprise move. But it didn't happen. And I'm pleased. I like being baffled, so I'm really just excited by Italy's game.
Yeah, I think it's a great start for Italy. Okay, let's move to. We'll go to Austria here, supporting Ukraine into Romania. Turkey does as well, but I have to suspect that's just some attempt by Conk as Turkey to gain some goodwill, if he can, and another bounce in the black between Russia and Turkey. So, like, analyze the Balkans. It doesn't have to be country by country.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I can talk about Austria just and then move on to other powers in the same breath, right? I will say, I had my doubts about this opening. Just again, the Vienna to Budapest move, it's giving up a little too much, and I still have my doubts about how this is setting up. I feel like supporting Trieste into Serbia might have been the better move, possibly. As you can see, Russia didn't exactly need that support. And you've got Russia creeping up back into Warsaw, and for whatever reason, I mean, it could very well be arranged, right? Like, I'll give you Trieste, so there's no naval threat from me temporarily. You build fleets, I build armies. It seems like a little bit of brinksmanship. I'm not one to talk, right? And it could still pay off, but it's a little risky. As for the Bulgarian support to Romania, I think you're right. It could be just trying to build into, to help Russia. I mean, I'm a little surprised that he didn't move to Serbia to attempt to block an attempted key. I mean, it could.
And that alone may be the reason why Trieste didn't move to Serbia. Like, maybe he just said, "This is what I'm going to do."
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, maybe Austria is being a little free and easy with what he's doing, since everyone seems to know, right? It could be that. So, it looks like Turkey, at least information-wise, has tapped into some of that flow of information there, which is good for him. Or it could be, it could even just be a little bit of malicious support to try to wedge apart the trust between them. That's something that, for instance, Pau is pretty adept at, I've noticed.
There's that, and it delays if it's inevitable that they're going after Turkey, it delays it a bit because, Austria's only going to get one build. Turkey's going to have to build to get to Turkey now a bit. Um,
Yeah, well, we'll talk. Let's like circle back there when we talk about builds, but definitely there's something interesting going on, right? Again, I do feel like Italy is doing a little bit of a, almost like one of those strikes where they work slow. I forget what they call them. You work slow on the production line to get your way. But and I will say, you can see, Conk that he just has a great handle on the, just tactics and strategy. I mean, there's the famous go back home move with Constantinople, going back to Smyrna so he could build likely a fleet in Constantinople, which is a much more useful place to have a fleet since you have access to both the Aegean and the Black Sea. Again, he's like, I think, in my opinion, trying to wedge them apart by giving a militia support into Romania. He's surrounded, but he really is. He's playing his cards in the best way he can. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him last a little longer than maybe we initially expected.
Okay. As we look at Russia, nothing surprising except we'll start in the southern, well, I guess the middle part of the board here. Moscow goes to Warsaw. My assumption there is he knew he was only going to get one build and wanted to build in, you know, depending either in Moscow or St. Petersburg, and that move freed him up to do that, is my guess. Although Village Idiot is like you, he thinks on a plane differently than I do. What do you view of that move?
Yes. Let's assure all our listeners that GHG is no threat. Once again, just trust him. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just a silly man who just bumbles his way to the finals over and over again. Anyway, sorry, I hate to do that too. Well, I was a little bit surprised by that move. Both me and Stitches predicted the hold in Moscow. I mean, I do see the value in it. I think it's exactly like you said. Probably, I mean, it does. The problem with this, it does almost telegraph the fact that you're going to build in the north, right? Because otherwise, why would you show your cards by moving to Warsaw? You could just build there.
It's the same difference if you think about it, right?
Well,
if you had held and build in Warsaw, you still have two armies, but this gives them the option, I guess, of doing both.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much. I mean, like I said, the downside means it really does kind of signal that you're going to build up north. I will say that, I mean, if you are going to build up north, it is a good defensive move, right? Because with Germany getting those armies, and this is something I really like to do. I mean, my philosophy with Germany is often smash west than smash east, right? You always have that risk. You can build those armies in Berlin and Munich and then just jump right into an exposed Warsaw, especially when you have someone committed to their northern and southern fronts. So this way you can move to Warsaw, then if needed, you can move to Silesia and block out one of those armies, right? So that they can't get in and take Warsaw from you. So yeah, I mean, if you want to kind of build up in the north, smart defensive move. And now that I think about it, with he kind of seems to anticipating this pressure being put on France. France, when we go over there, we can talk about it, but there's two different kinds of alliances to me in this game. You've got your active alliances and your passive alliances. So an active alliance would be, for instance, a highly coordinated Austria-Italian alliance, kind of trying to deceive other players or controlling the flow of information. You're planning moves together. Then you've got something with with Russia and France, right, where your interests are so geopolitically connected that you can even almost be enemies and still be working together, right? Like, in that sense, Russia and France, neither of them wants to see the other one go out in any kind of timely fashion. Now, you don't want to see them expand too fast either, right? So often you're using kind of the powers in between you as these kind of ping pong balls that you're hitting between each other, but you want your opponent still there. So I could really see Russia trying to put a little pressure on either, I'd say, England or Germany, maybe attempting not to take on both, in order to keep France rolling. And this is assuming he knew about this this kind of German-English alliance on their side of the board, I mean, he does seem to have his tentacles everywhere, so I wouldn't discount that. That's for sure.
Okay. Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, and obviously Russia has to be happy that it's a fleet that goes to Norway, not the, not the convoy of the army. Instead, the army goes to Belgium. And you alluded to the EG alliance, and it certainly looks like that's what's happened. Umble always says if you think uh, England's convoying to Belgium, both people should support it. That's his idea, as opposed to making a futile bounce. But sometimes there's deception there. But Germany's going to get two builds, England's going to get two builds, and France is going to get two builds. And France is a tough nut to crack defensively. What are your thoughts on the West in general?
Yeah, I mean, so like you said, I mean, Russia is just, if Russia had a hand in negotiating the fleet in Norway, I mean, that's just such a coup. I mean, and again, I alluded to this last episode where I was talking about how I grow frustrated with a lot of Russian players who just seem to think that England putting an army there is a matter of course, when in fact any army in Scandinavia, could quickly become a really terrible kind of guerrilla war situation. If it gets into Finland, if it gets into Russia itself, it will just terrorize your whole backfield. So if he had a hand in negotiating that, well, that is just a coup. That is masterful. And he really does seem to be playing a pretty good game at this point, so I wouldn't put him past him. As for the Germany and England, I will say, I think if you had a really strong English-German alliance, I think it actually serves that alliance better to let Germany go up big and have Germany take Belgium. Germany's more exposed. Germany is like kind of the meat shield for England's. But again, see, that option wasn't really fully open to them because he moved to York, right? So if he was going to support Germany into Belgium, that means the army kind of wastes time staying on the islands, which is a good defensive play. But when you don't have any kind of credible threat, you kind of want to get that army down. So yeah, I mean, though I might be, poo-pooing England's game too much here. Maybe limiting his options by going to York was part of his leverage for getting into Belgium. And I will say, once you get that army down onto the continent, it's not going anywhere. I mean, he doesn't need to even make like a kind of solid play with that army. It's going to be in there until they manage to trap it and disband it. He can push that thing deep. He can kind of enter into other theaters and alter the diplomacy on distant battlefields. Yeah, I mean,
it's a family show, Hand. All right, look. The builds. Let's go back. Italy gets two builds. I've not looked at the builds. I don't think you have either. If you're Italy, what do you think Italy builds?
Well, let's do the builds, but I will say, like, we should probably mention France's moves too, right?
Okay, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, again, it's hard for me to critique someone who's had such, success, prolonged success. And again, like, I just want anyone listening, I realize that a lot of my opinions are fairly idiosyncratic. But I just want to comment, like, I hate moving fleets to Portugal. It takes you out of the game. Look at this. I mean, he can no longer spring into the Mediterranean. He can't spring into the North Atlantic and put any pressure on England.
Okay, but in his defense, I think he thinks he's facing an EG.
Yeah.
Fleet breast, he's panicked.
Yeah, well, he doesn't have much of a choice, right? He wants those builds, but what I'm saying is I'm just critiquing the initial move. right? Of not putting yourself in a position where you can either keep that fleet in the mid-Atlantic or go somewhere like the south coast of Spain, which gives you options to kind of spring into other blue water kind of situations. As I mentioned, for instance, like the famous leapfrog move, like you can, if you move an army to Gascony, you can actually convoy into Portugal, and then that keeps you, poised like a snake ready to strike in the mid-Atlantic. I mean, that's, again, this is more of like a theoretical discussion, right? Not me critiquing what he's doing in this particular move.
Yeah, because in this move, I think he did exactly what he had to do, except for maybe Burgundy not supporting England or not moving to the Channel in the spring of 01 if he really thought there was an EG.
Yeah, I have to say, I would have still, that's true to an extent, like you get the two builds, I still would have been tempted not to go into Portugal and put myself at such a remove from the theaters, right? So if you stay in the mid-Atlantic and you build a fleet in Brest, you can actually force that fleet into the Channel, right? If you're in Portugal, you got to spend another move going back to see, I don't know. And then I have to say, like, I am surprised he moved Burgundy to Belgium. I mean, I can only assume that most likely Germany lied to him, right? An English lie wouldn't be too believable because, again, he'd be grounding his army.
It's very believable that Ruhr says he's going to cover Munich. So.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that could be it.
And so he thought there was only going to be one going into Belgium, so he thought he could bounce him out.
That could be, right? That could be. All
right, so
it seems a little bit hubristic, to think that you're going to keep it clear or take it yourself, but yeah.
The train's got to keep rolling, so we're going to go to builds here. Italy, we'll go back. We'll just keep going counterclockwise. Italy builds. What do you believe will happen, and what do you think should happen?
Okay, let me pull up the builds because I'm not seeing.
No. Look at the map first before you.
Oh! What do you think they'll build?
I have the builds here.
I've already looked at them, so.
Okay. Well, then, all right.
It seems like a little bit of a
You're ruining the drama. Let's put the builds here on the map.
Select them all correctly, and then just rubbing that in Umble's face later. But I don't think that would be very fair.
All right. Italy builds 2 fleets, no army. So in my mind, that's a big signal that that army in Trieste was ranged and does not serve to be any kind of threat now to Austria.
It could be. It could be. I mean, in that case, it would be a simple kind of exchange, simple exchange of the distribution of fleets and armies, right? I mean, it is just so lovely as Italy when you get that double fleet build. It opens up a lot. Usually when you make this kind of move, you want to actually disband your allies unit as you do it. But again, like it's just there's something amiss about what's going on. It's just there's just more. If you were looking at Austria and Italy as one power, there's more efficient ways to do this. There's places that give you deeper position. I don't know if that's just a function of them having to litigate, right, every move, and every move's like kind of a grind and a compromise. In which case, again, Italy could be just out for themselves to a degree. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It really gives Italy a lot of options here, and I'll be frank, I would be very tempted either this turn or the near future to kind of half-heartedly perhaps help them contain Turkey, but just leave Turkey as a kind of wall for them to beat their heads on and just kind of be a vulture and go west.
Well, there's going to be a lot of openings. Just you're saying bottle up. The problem is sometimes when you get committed west, the bottle of Turkey becomes loose, And by that time, there's so much hatred around the board that that's how Turkey can solo games sometimes just by hanging in there.
It's true. It's a risk, right? I mean, I'm a bit of a gambler in my thinking often. But I will say I've had great. So with Italy, the way I've always played Italy, I kind of like to play a muscular, kind of piratical Italy, be a little opportunistic. You have, you know, the great strength of Italy is that you can build you're almost an island power, but you do have access to the interior if needed. Your land borders are actually really defensible thanks to Switzerland's, and you can build fleets in every single one of your centers, and you can really, my thought is usually I want to have more fleets than anyone on the board, and preferably more fleets than everyone on the board. And he's well on his way to doing that, at least in the southern theater, right? You still have England up north. The thing about going against Turkey, right, is how many centers are you going to get from that triple alliance against Turkey, do you think, if you're Italy?
Well, isn't that always the math never works out? There are 3 parties to an AIR alliance, and there's 4 spaces on the board.
Exactly. So
a lot of times Russia becomes odd man out.
So
in that situation.
Exactly. Russia, or, honestly, often it can go a number of different ways. I mean, I've often joked that the kind of Lepanto means as Austria is kind of a king to you. You get your little Italian donkey, you ride it into Anatolia, and once it's all over, your donkey's exhausted, so you just put a bullet in its head. I've had great success kind of not burning those bridges and helping just enough that they're still on my side, but Turkey, you're like, oh my God, Turkey's a tactical genius. So it really sucks. We're having so much trouble taking him down. Meanwhile, you're kind of jump in like a vulture against France. If you can get that Iberian base, you're a corner power now, right? I mean, the northeast, and southwest corners of the board are the most defensible, in my opinion, on the board. You have that corner, they're not getting you out, especially if France is on his heels. But it's tough, right? It's tough. I mean, I really am a fan of kind of German-Italian cooperation. I mean, we were talking about Bavo and the emphasis on Austrian-German cooperation, which is powerful, but actually Italy and Germany can hold the center line without Austria if needed, which is not a recommended, recommended situation, but it is possible. Italy, as long as you neutralize that Western threat, you can hold that Mediterranean stalemate line if needed. I would say, if I was him, I would be considering just kind of swooping down and trying to take those 3 kind of Western Mediterranean centers, and then just at my own leisure going and unlocking Turkey for the others, right?
What do you think of the Russian position here? Russia builds the army north, and it's got some flexibility in Warsaw, but I'm a little concerned for Russia.
I am and I'm not. Like, Russia, in some ways, he seems to be doing great diplomatically, right? There's a fleet in Norway. He did build in St. Petersburg, but if the agreement between he and England is that England will only put fleets in Scandinavia and that Russia will only put armies in Scandinavia, which is a deal I've actually made myself. It even sometimes goes so far as letting England even put a fleet in St. Petersburg, right? That's the ultimate kind of putting both sides at ease move. I don't think that Village Idiot would go for that, but I wouldn't be. It's interesting. I wouldn't be entirely surprised to see that army in Sweden, convoyed over to Sweden with English support, perhaps. It would be. I would be somewhat surprised, but not entirely surprised. I do get your concern, though, right? Like, what is Russia's avenue for expansion here? Where's the next center he's going to get?
Russia's serving as the eastern flank, bouncing black all day long as the spoils may go to the AI.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. And to me, well, we can talk about Turkey, but with Italy dragging its heels a little bit, if I was Turkey, and it's kind of tough, right? Because Turkey had to build that second fleet, in my opinion.
Of course.
Yeah, he needs to take control of the Black Sea or bounce, uh, you know, keep them out of the Aegean. On the other hand, he with Italy dragging its heels with the temptation of the ripe harvests of the southwestern Mediterranean there for Italy. I would be reaching out to Italy. I would be urging her west, desperately keeping those secret kind of, those secret lines of communication open. And I would go hard against Russia, frankly. I would probably support Constantinople into the Black Sea, move to Armenia so that you can have that open retreat line for your army in Bulgaria if necessary. Put some heavy pressure there and hope that you can convince Italy to go west or to go easy on you a little bit.
So yeah. If we're going to see something imaginative, I think we have a good chance of seeing it in the 1902, because if Russia is frustrated with how the South may develop, there's a lot of room here for an RT to form, and that could give, the Aegean's lost right now. So, but if Konk had Smyrna to Syria, Khan to Smyrna, Ankara to Khan, and somehow could get, on side with Russia, Galicia's, potentially there with the Russia that theoretically would know everything that AI is going to do. So if they could pounce on geography with Russia's inside knowledge of what's happening with AI, I don't think there's an RT, but if there is, now would be the time to start it.
That's true. That's true. I mean, it's hard. Austria almost seems like the softer target at this point. If Russia could get, I mean, if just geopolitically, I could see, again, this is me. It's so hard because, I really do think differently than some of these players. I mean, Italy, if you could get Italy on board too, Italy could use that single army with Russian help to kind of stave off Austria while doing that kind of swing to the west that I mentioned as well. You do not want to let Turkey out of the box though, especially with the multiple fleets. Again, like as Italy, you want to. There's long term. If you're going to do well as Italy, France is going to have to go fairly early, and your big rivals are going to be Turkey and England, actually, because those are the two other powers that can build fleets in every center. They can very, very rapidly just shove fleets down your throat. You kind of want to outpace them. Yeah, it's really dynamic. I mean, Russia has a lot to worry about. It's the fleet build in Kiel is concerning. For instance, I mean, I think that's almost certainly going to the Baltic.
Right. That's the German saying Sweden is my territory.
Yeah. I mean, the more aggressive move would to be build armies in Berlin and Munich, but it's smart. It's smart. I mean, Kiel, it also is. It's a great place to build a fleet. You can go to both the Western Eastern theater, but yeah, if Germany takes the Baltic, the risks start mounting for Russia. Unless Russia obviously blocks him out of the Baltic, I could see him supporting in there. Honestly, the Baltic. I mentioned this term. I mentioned fetish tiles last time. This is a little bit of an excursus for newer players, and I apologize for more experienced people. But when you're looking at where to move, right? A lot of people just see the centers and they think, I want to move towards that center. Often the most useful, when you're beginning, just count the centers that surround a tile. How many centers are adjacent to that tile, right? Because once you occupy that tile, even if you can even say you come in peace and just sit there, and they don't want to push you out because you're going to be able to retreat into a center, right? And then beyond that, the Baltic, beyond the fact that it borders 4 centers, which is beautiful, it's also, I think of it almost as a bridge. Like if I get a fleet in there, I'm parking it there long term, because either, if as Russia, if you get in there, you can just sit there and torture Germany for years. If you're Germany, you have a bridge, right? You can build armies and you can convoy them straight into the heartland, straight into, for instance, Livonia, and you can be threatening 3 of their home centers. You can, move forces in and out of Scandinavia. And Russia is usually pretty hard pressed to bring 2 fleets to bear in order to push you out of that bridgehead. So, yeah, I see it moving to the Baltic and it being a problem for Russia for a long time, unless Russia can somehow keep them out of there.
All right, 2 English fleets, especially in Liverpool, has to be at least the side from England. France, we're pressing our advantage against you to the maximum right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that Doc was his name, correct?
Yes, Doc Bender.
Yeah, so that, I mean, you can see what Doc was thinking in terms of being the #1 seed and picking France, right? Because if there was a lot of other powers that if you were dealing this kind of determined move against you, that you'd be in a lot of trouble. Whereas unless, Italy joins the feeding frenzy, which as kind of a hungry, ocean beast myself, I probably would do. But, France, it's going to be a hard fight, right, to get their next, for Germany and England to get their next center, even though they're likely going to get into Burgundy. Even though England has those 4 fleets. The one exception would be that if England does have something worked out with Germany here, where that army build and the fleet in Norway is part of a kind of north to south sweep, and he can bring all 4 of those fleets to bear. So, for instance, he's going to take, the Channel, move to the Irish Sea, and even start bringing, another fleet over. Then France could be in a little trouble, frankly. But as long as he can move back into the Mid-Atlantic and kind of slow things down, start ringing alarm bells, make his case to Russia that you don't want the opposite pole that's balancing the power falling too quickly, then, he has time. He has time to worm his way out of this.
Okay, we have to wrap this up pretty quickly, but just looking at spring of 02, this is what the map looks like. Any meta predictions here?
I mean, it's just basically as I said. I think that France and Russia, England and Russia, it's very likely that they do have a kind of cooperation going unbeknownst to Germany, who's taking a little bit more of an aggressive stance against Russia, right? I also think that there is probably, as I mentioned before, good lines of communication between Austria and Germany. Germany's aggression against Russia is probably known to Austria, who is happy to have someone passively limit his rapidly expanding neighbor. Italy, it really could go either way. He has a lot of options. I mean, they could very quickly, if this AIR holds, just completely surround Turkey, but it's never going to be a quick war there, right? And it's often for little gain. So Italy, I really wouldn't be that surprised if he started making a move west, to the chagrin of Austria, who frankly is not in the best spot either right now. It actually makes me think, I do wonder if things continue to go as they are, if Austria and Turkey will kind of form a coalition of the dispossessed and the downtrodden, but who knows?
Okay, so Let's play the which power would you want to be? If it was me on this board, I'd want to be Italy for these reasons. One, France is about to get locked up north. I'm not sure I move right now towards France, but it would be tempting just to see them get locked up. If I saw France get locked up with England and those fleets, and moving west might not be so difficult a nut for Italy to crack. Meanwhile, he's got Austria on side, and they're going to have the Aegean. I guess there'll be a debate over who gets it, but that Aegean is such a powerful space. But Italy's looking good, and is utilizing all the flexibility she has in this game. And who would you like to be, if anyone?
Well, I think I'd still like to be Italy as well. Again, mostly because of the particular way I like to play and what I consider fun and my, like I said, impulsive pleasure-seeking nature. Yeah, just the fact that Italy has built in a way that he can move in multiple directions. The fact that the moves are enigmatic. That I like that. I like when people don't exactly know what I'm doing. Another option, if we're talking about pure who's going to win, I have to say, despite all my ball breaking, England is in a good position too. He's got 4 fleets. A 2 build corner power is always a problem. Even if that army ends up getting disbanded or something, you still manage to turn it into a fleet. With England, I really like to spend as much possible time as people will allow me to just build and build and build fleets, kind of build a spider web of fleets, which is like my infrastructure for when the armies start coming out, and I can just fly them all over the map. So yeah, I think.
Well, I hear you, but I'm more of a build armies earlier kind of guy for England. You want to be a player on the continent, so it's different strokes for different folks.
That's for sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and well, for those of you listening to this podcast, I don't really know much about Audacious Hand other than his audacious play and what I'm learning in these interviews. But one thing I know is I guarantee you his SAT verbal score must have been off the charts, as I'll have to look up a few of the words that he discussed. And I exercise a large vocabulary as a sesquipedalian myself, and I'd be interested to know exactly what that score was, but I won't make him reveal it. In any event, thanks Audacious Hand, thanks to diplomacybriefing.com, thanks to our players and the Season 5 finals, which is shaping up to be a good one. And this will be posted after the spring of 1902 moves have gone through. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Yeah, this was fun.
Didn't want to reveal that SAT verbal score,
huh? I mean, I actually got a perfect score. It was a long time ago, but yeah.
It doesn't surprise me at all. Congratulations.
Math has always been more of a challenge. So.
All right. Well, congratulations on the perfect score, verbal.
Yeah.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Cool. Okay. See ya.